doing. Okay, Joel, hit it.
Thanks for the reminder about starting the recording. So I think it was great to start with the what excites us, because I think as we talked about this, right, less property to us means that we have more financial and human capital so that we can be more missional. And that's exciting, right? It's much more exciting to be missional than take care of mundane things like facilities. And towards the end, we kind of came up with that quote, which it was, moving forward is way better than standing still. And that was towards the end of the second question as we were trying to summarize our points here. Concerns, even though we'll have less property, there will be more use of the property, more use of the facilities. And then managing that may take more paid services. And hand in hand in that was how to make things fit, because with 1/4 of the space, we may not be able to support all the different simultaneous events that we have going on now. So, and then probably lastly, but just as important as our other points, the congregational growth part, right? It's exciting to think that with a new building, a refurbished building, we'll be able to focus more on congregation both, but they're both parallel tracks, right? And one of the phrases that came up was how to create an invitational congregation that encourages growth. So.
Thank you. The next group is the, let's see, Kirk, Terry, Linda. Sorry, I can't remember everybody in there. This came from Kirk. Somebody needs to present this. Remembering brevity.
I will present. Margaret, Cecilia, Carolyn were also in that group. We had several things that were really quite exciting. We're excited to get back to the work of the church, as this process, as important as it is, just takes a great deal of energy. And so it's exciting to imagine being more lean and ready to take on the ministry with all of our energy. We're excited about the fact that we have children, we have young people, they have great ideas. Let's make sure to engage them in conversations about how to use the space. They're going to come up with things we've never thought of. They are very creative. And we're also excited to have a church that's physically accessible. In terms of concerns, there's lots of discussion around how do we know what to keep, how do we know what to get rid of, to leave behind, and what's the process that we're going to use to figure that all out? How do we have the kinds of conversations that allow those decisions to be made? And finally, this is a big move in the right direction towards sustainability. So how do we maintain that sustainability going forward?
Great, thank you very much. Group C. I know this was sent to me by Callista. Who's talking for Group C?
I'm happy to talk for Group C. So our first point was that we think in a concern, it's important to think through what the nuts and bolt process of development will look like. So kind of one concern was, how do we actually design a building and make it fit our needs? And then we talked a lot about figuring out the needs of our community, and that this is a great opportunity to be developing relationships with our community and really fulfilling the needs of Belmont and Watertown, and that these relationships could exist as kind of a secondary congregation, that we should consider these people as part of our community and our congregation, even if they aren't there on Sunday. We talked about it's very exciting to consider that we could have a building that is accessible and energy efficient and sustainable. And then lastly, we wanted to acknowledge that there are pieces of this process that will be very emotionally complex for people in the congregation in various different ways, particularly when it comes to the idea of leaving space. or selling buildings.
Okay, great, thank you. The D group, I can't remember.
So
Before you start, Dan, I just want to apologize to this group that I cut some stuff out because you went way beyond the 3 or 4.
that's okay. That's fine.
I didn't edit. I just like tried to grab the stuff that seemed.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
All right.
So in our group, we had Greg, Sandy, Judy, Diane, Gore, and Oscar. So we pointed out, first of all, that we had this long-standing need to downsize. We had too much property, and that it was hard to keep up with. The property was deteriorating, and it was kind of stressing out our volunteers. We're just relying on the church community, the membership to run things, and concerns about property detracted our ability to do other missional activities. So we feel like less energy and resources spent on maintaining all of the property and its concerns will allow for more energy to envision other possibilities to more easily continue our current ministries. Additionally, by detaching ourselves from the properties, that's going to open up opportunities for new missions that we may not even envision right now. So we feel like it just will create a space for, lack of a better word, magic to happen, right? Or grace to happen. The other concern we had was by moving or downsizing, we will be losing a portion of our community. The particular concern was that, look, if in Watertown, that church was failing and the Watertown folks came to Belmont, maybe Belmont's a better community for holding a church. And so if we move to Watertown, is that going to put us at a disadvantage because of the area? We've got competing churches right around us. But by downsizing, maybe it will give us an opportunity by creating some financial resources that we could maybe hire a new person, a staff person, to evangelize, to go out and look for young families and kids. And we have a real strong education program that may appeal to people now. So there's a through line with the concern to opportunity, and that was the discussion in our group.
Thanks. And the last group.
Hi, I'm gonna speak for our group. It was MJ, Hugh, Mary, Louise, and Annie, along with myself. So, first, just sort of recognizing we're operating in a space that's sort of been given to us. We haven't had any input into the space that we're currently swimming in. So this is an opportunity to, in a smaller space, be more intimate and focused with our mission, and also to be intentional about how we redevelop the space to serve that mission. One of the things that we struggled with a little bit was the idea of comparing like the space that we're in with the space that we would be in, when that's going to require a lot of some redevelopment. So that there's a lot of unknowns. What's the potential of the different spaces, setting aside where they are and their histories and all of that. Next, I think there was some thought about understanding both, what you can think of as deal breakers, or on the positive flip side, the must-haves that we need in this new space, so that we know how to sort of move forward and how to direct the redevelopment. But making sure that when we express our our deal breakers and our must-haves, that we tie them back to a missional purpose, as opposed to a gut feel. Then there's some excitement about the idea of choosing partners within a space that can potentially amplify our impact on the community. MJ in one example talked about how a church had been redeveloped and some of the space had been used for a school, but the church and the school then shared space as needed. And so each of their footprints was able to be a little bit bigger than the space that they owned, because they had a good partner and a good neighbor. So we should think about the choice of partners. Understanding, some of these things are overlapping, but understanding the facts about the data and the spaces and what can be done with them will also help to direct us. And in all of these, we come back to sort of this question mark of what's our mission, and I think the importance of that is that we use that as a touchstone as we're making these decisions. So there you have it.
Great. Thank you. So with the remaining time we have, I wanted us to have the opportunity to voice questions that we have. I want to be really clear. These are not questions that anybody in this moment is going to answer. They may be questions that we don't have the answers to yet. But what I would invite you to be thinking about is, given what your group talked about, what you've been told to think about, what you've heard from other groups, as the groups have brought back what their greatest ideas were, what was the top things that happened in the group. What are the questions that come up for you right now that you say, in order for us to move forward, I'm going to need to know X, okay? And nobody in the space needs to answer that question. And even if you think you have an answer, I would encourage you to hold back on that, because I want to just make sure we get the questions out. And then in the I'll stop us with about 5 minutes to 12, so that we can think about what people have asked and see who's willing to take on the responsibility of trying to find the answer. Okay? So, questions that this conversation has raised for you about our redevelopment. What do you need to know to move forward? And we don't have to worry about writing these down, because it's being recorded for us and there'll be a transcript. Dan?
Yes, one thing that was raised and we didn't touch on in our breakdown, but Oscar wanted us to consider as a church our missional commitment to the international student community. Are we going to be able to maintain what we're doing to help international students, because that could help enhance our church, but is it going to be possible? And he is very concerned that we do maintain that, and so I wanted to express that we consider it.
Great. Annie?
Sure. The thing I feel like I need to know going forward is we have talked in a lot of vague things about we will have enough space for our missions, or we will have enough space for what we currently do. I would love to see a complete list of everything we define as we have enough space for, and make sure that everyone agrees that the things that we want to commit to are on there, and then make sure that it still actually fits in a quarter of our current space.
Okay.
I have a
Laura?
question. I'd like to know how we're going to engage the younger people, young families, how we're going to get their input, and how to listen to them and to have a mechanism for their engagement.
David.
This is actually this is sort of a little bit of an addendum to what Annie was saying, is understanding not just amount of space, but the particulars of that space. In addition, there were things brought up like the function of the gym, for example, which is a specific kind of space that we have to consider. And the second thing that I think we have to think about, but is clearly not going to be answered today, is redevelopment takes time. And in that time, how do we imagine both our church living in whatever space is not being redeveloped, and how our missional work is served in the year or two or whatever that's happening.
To tack onto that, like, what is the short-term timeline and what is the long-term timeline? Because I've heard everything from 3 years to 10 years. So to get a sense of what has to happen in what order and where the stumbling blocks might come in that would extend the process.
I think one of the questions that came up in our group was to get an idea, a clearer idea, and I don't know exactly how to do it, but it can be done, I think, is to see how many people we might lose or would lose if we made a move from Belmont to Watertown. How many people who are currently in Belmont would decide no, they would decide not to move with this congregation and choose to be with another congregation, or choose not to be churched at all.
Mark, Hugh and Mary have a question. You don't want to speak this? You want me to read this? I want it on the recording is what I care about. Hugh and Mary have the question. Okay, go ahead.
I just thought we were running out of time. Yeah, what the question? Nope. The question is, your presentation showed that that we will, on the finances, showed that we will reduce our liabilities of property. It did also show that we would, under worst case scenario, still be drawing from the endowment for operating expenses. So I think we need to keep in front of us, how are we going to make this congregation solvent after we move?
This is a little bit related to Carolyn's comment about stumbling blocks. I would be curious to know if there are spaces where we think we will run into issues with the town, or like particularly like government issues. Where might that be? Or where are there parts where, nope, we're totally fine?
Hi. Can you hear me?
Go ahead, Sandy.
Okay. So maybe I've missed something, but I keep thinking the Korean community, I'm just curious about what's happening with them. And my second thing is, when we reconsider our properties, I had raised the idea of other able-bodied persons. We have always had people who have physical disabilities, even if they were temporary. And are we considering in our rebuilding about things like sight and hearing impaired? I just started reading a book, What a Body Can Do by Sue Hendren, who is talking about architecture. I haven't finished it, but just wondering if at the beginning we're going to think about those type of things too, along with what we would like for our church, because it would open up opportunities for other people to join us.
Okay. Philip, you're muted, so you need to unmute.
Thank you. I've done it. Thank you, Laura. Yep. Yeah, my question is how will the redevelopment plan fulfill the mushrooming needs of the community in terms of the population in both Belmont and Watertown? The population is just booming, it's doing up. And at the same time, the church is shrinking. So how are we going to make those adjustments to create sustainability to that quarter facility we are putting forward? Thank you.
Great. There's still time.
How do we find out what's involved in things we want to keep? I've heard people talking about stained glass windows. I've heard that ones in Watertown need to be refurbished. I've heard that ones in Belmont want to be moved. That's a huge piece of, if we're trying to maintain a spiritual environment, we want to retain or move any stained glass windows. Who do we talk to about that and what's involved? Because that just seems like it would be a huge piece. And whether or not it's part of our priority with the redevelopment, we need to do a little bit of research on that, I think.
Laura?
At the beginning of our process, will we create a committee or a group that will identify the kinds of missional partnerships we're going to need as a secondary congregation in the future?
Thought you had a little cartoon hand there, Gary. Okay, so we're almost to our time. I'm very conscious of not wanting to hold you beyond our time. Any last questions that people have? This is not the last time that you will ever get to talk about this. Lord knows we will be talking. But for today, any last questions? Kirk.
How are we going to get the people involved that don't have technology?
Okay.
Yeah,
One made a comment to me that, well, this doesn't really apply to me. I've got better things to do with my time.
Okay. Kirk?
Just to build on what Philip mentioned, I must say I haven't spent any time thinking about what the Watertown demographics are going to look like 10 years from now, but I imagine they're very different. And how does that factor into our planning?
Anything else? Yeah, Laura?
Excellent job, Laurel. Very well done.
That wasn't really what I was looking for.
I know, but I still wanted to say this is a lot of work and you did a great job.
Thank you. So I'm going to ask Gary to pray for us, but before I do that, okay, so before I ask Gary to pray and for us to be able to leave and move on with our day, I feel very strongly that when we ask questions, that's a really important part of the process. And it is important for all of us who have committed our time and energy to take responsibility for trying to find the answers to those questions. So what I am going to do is when we get the transcript, I'm going to separate out all of these questions and you're going to see them in a public space. And I invite you all to think about not whether it's your job to answer any of these questions, but which of the questions will you pursue answers for? Because we need the answers to these questions. And one of the things I learned from being on the subcommittee was the subcommittee didn't have any special expertise at all. We hired a consultant for that. But we have all become very knowledgeable because we've been pursuing questions. And so all of us have the opportunity to pursue some question and gather information. We may not get to the end point, but we all have the ability to gather information. So please, when you see this list of questions, consider which questions you can take some responsibility for, because in the next 2 or 3 weeks, we're going to need to keep meeting again. You have a little bit of time to think about these answers. We're going to have to come together again with more information, because these are the things that are on the hearts and minds of our congregation. Okay. Gary, can you close us, please?
Again, thank you, Laurel, for your excellent leadership and hard work in getting us together and preparing the documents and helping us put together some amazing information. Let us pray. Lord, you are the potter and we are the clay. You shape us, you form us. You create us for your purposes and will. And at times, oh Lord, you reshape us, reform us, repurpose us for the work and changing times. And Lord, you're the provider and constructor of all good things, and you have built up over the centuries your church. And at times, oh God, you are with us when it is time to reform, to reshape, to renew. When we are not aware that it is that time. But you nudge us and you prod us. You give us information. You create questions within our hearts and minds. And here we are. We're grateful for your spirit as you have moved through individual voices, the gathering of groups, the work of leaders. So may your spirit continue to reshape and reform and renew us for your mission and help us to sharpen our view, widen our vision, and help us to claim the wisdom that you have given to us through your holy word and through the power of your faith community. We can't do this alone, O Lord. We need you. Keep us present and faithful and obedient to your will. May you bless the rest of our day, and we look forward to gathering again in your holy place at home or in sanctuary to worship and praise you for all that you have given to us this morning and always. Amen.